Welcome back to 8 Cubes. There was some confusion last time, but I'm KMBest and he's Lambie series, and we are here to talk about the 8 most important topics in Marvel's Snap. We're going to start with Jocasta, 3/3 activate. Use the activate abilities of your other cards here. Their activates do not get used up. So this is effectively Wong for activates. It also, as an activate itself, if you draw her and have her on the board, you can effectively use the activate of cards on the final turn of the game if you draw them on the final turn of the game. I think that is a notable quality of life upgrade, but I think her baseline power of 3/3 probably keeps her from being an Invisible Woman first steps level, this hits the metagame like a nuclear warhead kind of card, and puts her more in the range of you find 1 or 2 cards that you run with her that fit what your deck is otherwise doing. Like, you know, maybe she starts showing up in discard with Bullseye kind of deal. We've seen how good double Bullseye can be. That kind of stuff seems like a plausible direction for her. Maybe she starts showing up in like various small package formats. I don't know how much I believe in a Jocasta deck. What do you think, Lambie?
So this card is very scary to me. Like, it's literally one of those cards that just needs one good interaction, right? Like, you just need one good interaction to synergize with this, and then it just goes out of control. Obviously, the stat line is meant to be not fantastic because the effect could potentially go out of control. But can you imagine like the bullseye scenarios where this works out with the bullseye? You just win, right? On the spot. It's just crazy because it doesn't use up the activate abilities, which is, I think, the main selling point for me. It's like you double up, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. It's just the main selling point for me. Like, if I can double up on a very potent activate ability, that takes the cake for me. That being said, like, I do agree mostly that it's not really a Jocasta deck. It's basically just find the most busted activate ability that you can pair this with in your 12-card deck, and then that's the deck for Jocasta.
Yep. There are a couple that stick out to me as like, oh, that's kind of cute, right? Like, we have Omega Sentinel and Black Widow, right? So if you want to play a Cerebro 3 deck with Jocasta, Omega Sentinel, and Black Widow, it's like, okay, I can see that, right? Like, I can see why you would want to do that, right? You're a Cerebro 3 deck. They missed
an annoying deck, though.
Yeah, it's just like the world's most annoying thing. Like, that's the kind of thing I can see her doing, right? Like, that, maybe you can end up doing something with that. That feels like a reasonably powerful enough upside to just be like, all right, yeah, you know, you could do that. That makes perfect sense. The problem is, like, what happens then is you have played Jocasta, Black Widow, and Omega Sentinel all on the same lane, presumably, and you have to win another lane somehow. And it's like, yeah, I don't know if you're exactly set up to do that. There might be, like, a really cool way to do this, where, like, you set it up, and then you activate them on the final turn, then Ghost Spider one of them out to, like, more evenly distribute your power. But yeah, that's sort of largely where I'm at with Jocasta, where it's like you find something stupid that maybe works, and you will like run her in a context that can afford to run her, basically.
I think this card is currently well designed because the restriction, firstly, the stats, like I said, not too fantastic, which is great. And it's also restricted by the fact that activate your other cards here, right? Like the fact that they all have to be in the same place. It's very good. I would say it's good restriction, but like this kind of card, just like you need to like remember its existence whenever new activate cards are printed, and then see if it's possible to synergize. But yeah, a card that could have very high upward potential for sure.
I've been wrong about Super Adaptoid's release schedule, and I put the blame for that squarely on every website that I check. It's definitely not my fault for not vetting this properly. Nothing could ever possibly be my fault. But I do think that Super Adaptoid, as far as I understand, and keep in mind I've gotten this wrong before, he is coming out as a direct-to-series 4 at the end of the season. Just maybe at the same time as Jocasta, maybe a week after Jocasta. I actually can't figure it out. I think it's supposed to be at the same time as Jocasta. There's a whole thing going on here with timing that I don't particularly understand. But Super Adaptoid is worth talking about in the context of Jocasta is probably the only card that would ever make you want to play this card. Super Adaptoid, of course, a 3/5 that steals an opposing activate as his on reveal. Now, This is interesting, I think, because first of all, they gave the tech card a really good stat line, which I think demonstrates that they're reasonably worried about Jocasta's stuff being strong, but also demonstrates generally that they just don't really feel super comfortable having no outlets to something. I think one of the things that people felt really bad about with Invisible Woman First Steps, and I think they were wrong about this, to be clear, but it does matter that they felt that way, was I don't have anything that can interact with it. And in much the same way that people who were originally testing Marvel Snap complained about the lack of a mulligan, and Ben Brode put Quicksilver in the game, and Quicksilver is not a solution to the mulligan problem in a real sense, but he does exist. And so people that were complaining about the mulligan basically stopped complaining about the mulligan. I feel like that's the same thing with Invisible Woman First Steps, where it's like people identified the problem incorrectly, which was, I can't interact with this stuff because it all says end of turn on it, and we need a tech card that says end of turn. And they made Ghost. Ghost does absolutely nothing, but she does exist, so there is a theoretical solution to the problem. And I kind of think the same dynamic is happening here, where it's like, I don't really think Super Adaptoid is going to be particularly relevant a lot of the time. I don't really think you're going to be playing him a lot of the time. He's just going to exist occasionally, but because he exists, they're just naturally going to cut down on the people complaining about whatever interaction people have with Jocasta.
Yeah, so my thing about this card is that to me it's a bit more simple, which is like it's like they allow a tech card like this. With this is basically rogue for activates, right? If you think about it, it's basically rogue for activates, but it's a 3/5. They allow this to be a 3/5, I think, also because they know. I mean, Second Dinner definitely tested. They know that like it's not gonna do the steal a very game breaking activate thing very often, at least for now anyway. So like for this to see play, it needs to be like worth looking at stat wise, and that's why the 5 stat is there. I do agree though that for the most part, like honestly, even stealing the Jocasta, like it's more like it gives your opponent the downside rather than like it actually benefits you, right? Because if you're stealing the Jocasta ability, you kind of need to benefit from it as well to like actually think of like maybe this card being worth running, in my opinion. Because like it's 3/5 is just basic right now at this point. So like yes, you do get to steal the Jocasta effect, but like that's it, right? Like you probably don't benefit from it at all. So I think this card is very mid. Like as a tech card, I think it's one of the most mid ones I've seen in a while.
What I'm interested in is the dynamics this enforces on Jocasta play, and whether or not this pushes people, like, because the way I think about Jocasta, right? I think it's largely going to be these small package kind of things. The more it's like, I'm building up one big Jocasta lane and Kamehamehaing you, the better this card is.
Basically, don't be Wong. You're trying to say don't be Wong, Arnim, Zola, Black Panther thing, right?
Right. And I don't think Jocasta has the capability to be that right now, just because of the other cards around it. So it's going to be a smaller package, which sort of means to me, like, I think there might be a lot of, like, I play Jocasta and activate her immediately. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Like,
like the immediate profit of the Jocasta, so that like you don't get to experience any nonsense that your opponent can do anyway.
And also, like, some of the Jocasta things you want to be activating in the middle, like if we're doing Black Widow, right? Whatever order you get it in, you're doing it as like during the game, right? Like it's not like you're getting rug pulled off your Jocasta value on turn 6. And I think that kind of matters. And I think Super Adaptoid does inform that. But I also think that's the direction Jocasta was probably going anyway. On to Warlock, who is kind of a very funny card to double up on with Jocasta. I will say that much. Getting a full 10 discounts into your hand is pretty... I'm not going to lie. That's probably game winning, or it would be if the world's most evil card, Mobius and Mobius, didn't exist. But I think largely Warlock is in a spot, or in the spot that he's in, because of the power of Mobius, right? It is not, it should not be lost on anyone that they buffed Mobius, I want to say 2 to 4 weeks before releasing Warlock. And I think a lot of the time people accuse them of like having a sort of overarching plan to like sell new cards by nerfing their counters or buffing them or releasing them too strong. And I think that largely that's not true. And what happens is people just notice the times when it does happen and they don't notice the time when it doesn't happen. And I just want to point out, like, very explicitly, they basically sabotaged this card's release with that buff. Like, almost entirely, they basically sabotaged this card's release by keeping Mobius at 3/4. And I think that it's notable, it's interesting, this is worth pointing out. just to push against the people who typically only notice when something goes wrong and don't notice when like they accidentally not ruin but severely weaken one of their own cards in the name of balance, right? And I think that Warlock is a cool card that does strong stuff, but fundamentally the strong stuff it does also dies to Mobius. So as long as Mobius is in a bunch of different decks in order to deal with the other things that cheat energy, which I don't know where you'd rank Warlock compared to Pixie or Mr. Negative or Sarah or whatever, right? I don't know what your specific ordering for that is, but it's in that grouping. And as long as people are doing stuff in that grouping, you're going to get splash damage from trying to be a Warlock deck.
Yeah. I mean, that ranking, to be honest, for me, it's a bit more simple. It's like I would definitely rank Warlock above Pixie simply because I think it's a lot easier to get the payoff from something like Warlock. Pixie is like completely random, and sometimes even the payoff isn't good enough anyway, right? Like for Warlock, it's definite. So I think having some like controlled amount of like what the payoff is for sure is important in a game like Marvel Snap where you need to count the points. But that aside, I do agree. Actually, what I really wanted to say, like before you mentioned the ranking thing, was like in this topic is I think people overlook that Second Dinner has gotten better at making the player base happy. Is what I'm trying to say. I think they are actually relatively good at like knowing how to keep the player base happy right now, because like the whole Mobius buff like way before the Warlock was released, right? Was like I think they just knew. Like they knew that like this card needed to be hit with a Mobius and kept under control. So like they know how to like stop people from whining these days, and I think like that's a good thing for sure.
We were pretty on point talking about which cards were safe to be reverted and which were not safe to be reverted. Enchantress and Negasonic did not get reverted. Pat ourselves on the back. We're very smart about that. But one card that I did expect to be reverted that was not was Shang-Chi. And I think that this is kind of interesting because a lot of what Shang-Chi does is... I guess this is hard to explain, or like... Really what this does is make Sauron decks functional again. And outside of that, it's had shockingly little impact. And I think that's what surprised me. Like, I've thought of Shang-Chi as like, oh, this is a reasonable gate on the metagame for a while. And it's basically been totally booty butt cheeks outside of the context of like, I am also playing Fenris Wolf Cannonball Mercury for the last, I don't know, 5 months, I would guess. And that hasn't impacted its play rate at all. But this happening has impacted its play rate pretty dramatically because people have finally realized that it's not that good anymore. And every deck has sort of designed itself around the context of it. And I kind of wonder what happens when that restriction isn't there. We've seen the early bits, which is like Sauron is back. But I think it's also like good news for, if you're a Darkhawk gamer, if you're a Ronin gamer, if you're a Devil Dinosaur gamer, if you want to play a 5-drop that like exists and is big, there's just a lot less things that are going to meaningfully interact with you. There's a lot less Shang in 40% of decks, right? And I think that is notable to me. It's interesting. It's probably good for the game. And I guess I just assumed he was a bigger floodgate than he was, but a lot of the stuff that would be floodgated by Shang gets dealt with by Mobius and Stardust and Mercury, and I don't want to be like, we don't need you anymore. But I mean, like, maybe give him one more point of power and call it a day and keep the effect like this. I don't know.
I feel like in the context of the current meta, you got it right in that like Shang is not really necessary because most of the stuff like the build up, right, is being gate kept by like Mobius, Stardust, and basically your axis of evil, essentially. Like it's being gate kept by that, right? And to be honest, I kind of am like I mean, to me, I never complained about Shang as a card, right? Like I didn't care whether it was what it was in its previous form and what it was like what it is right now. To me, it doesn't really matter because like you can play, or you can play around it. But like the fact that because of Shang's lowered play rate, you're allowed to do the whole like you said, like play the big 5-drop deck again, just this big card on curve and like feel safe enough to do that. I guess it's also opening up diversity. Maybe that's why they left it like that, because like Shang in its old form also killed Darkhawk. Shang in its current form also kills the big Darkhawk.
People
But
just
the
play
fact that
less of it, yeah.
Yes, correct. Like the Shang does the same thing versus the same stuff that like the Dark Hawk or the Dino or whatever big thing, you know. But like the fact that the play rate is lowered gives you an optionality to play these and not feel so afraid that they will just die to the Shang. So I guess it keeps diversity around, you know, like for the fact that like people play less Shang. So I think it's okay.
Moving on to the axis of evil, Juggernaut, Mobius M. Mobius, and Mercury. First things first, I know people are going to be like, how is Mercury Juggernaut the axis of evil? Well, you can move the Mercury, but also if the cards are face down in a lane where you have Mercury, Juggernaut will still move them. Mercury, for reasons unknown to me, only impacts cards that are face up, so that is definitely a true thing. But I feel like basically every deck I've been playing recently is these three cards, and it's because they are... I don't want to use the word generic because they're not generic, right? These aren't like generically
Mercury is
good.
not, yeah. Mercury is for sure not generic.
But it does feel like there are just shocking amounts of times where they are applicable. Like there's just so many times where it's just like, oh, it's nice that I have a 2/2 that can move because I'm playing against Clog or whatever, right? Oh, it's nice that I have a 2/2 that can move because there's a Sanctum Sanctorum. Oh, it's nice that I have a 2/2 that can move because I'm playing against Move, right? Like there's just a bunch of times when it happens, and like Mobius is the same way. It could be my opponent's deck, it could be a location, either affecting me, like Dream Dimension, or maybe they're a deck that plays 6s and there's a Titan and I need to get rid of it, or maybe they're a Thanos deck and I need to get rid of it, or maybe they're a Mr. Negative deck and I need to get rid of it, and it's just like constantly relevant. And Juggernaut is just, I mean, he's still a beast.
Juggernaut.
When he got nerfed, I was like, there are going to be decks where this is a buff. And that turns out I was wrong because it's not every deck where this is a buff, but it's more than the decks. Like, I was like, there are going to be some decks where this is a buff. And it's like, no, like, there are going to be a lot of decks where this is a buff. Like, this card is still quite strong. I remain steadfast in my desire to see Juggernaut be like a 5/8 or something. Like, I just don't think...
Wow.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Like, I didn't think... I pitched 4/5 like 6 months ago, right? I did a video where I was like, this is what they should do. And over time, the numbers I got comfortable putting on Juggernaut, it's like, all right, by the time they actually nerfed Juggernaut, I was pretty convinced it was like, actually, it should be like 4/4. Like, 4/5 is a little too good. And now I'm just sitting here and it's just like, you know what? This card should be a 4/3. Or a 5/8 or something like that. I don't think I'm cool with that anymore. Because when we talk about generically applicable, like that guy is just win a lane so much of the time. And this package to me has become the real heart of mid-range, where normally you think of mid-range decks in terms of their points. This is an Invisible Woman First Steps deck. This is a Scream deck. This is a Hydra Stomper deck. To me, what I start with are those cards. And then I figure out what the points are coming from later. You know, the points package is the part that's replaceable. Like, that's not actually the important part here. The important part is that I have those cards. And to a lesser degree, the subject of topic 7 thing, First Steps, right? Like, that is what it feels like to me is like, if I have those cards and reasonable points, I should just be in every single game that I play. There are no free losses on the board for me, and a lot of decent wins as long as the point package is good enough.
Yeah. So this is a bit sad also because the point of mid range was to have like decent amount of points plus tech, right? So you could like just beat out all the other stuff comfortably because you're a consistent deck that just outputs like good stats. But like you said, now the stats are a little bit more secondary because just shifting everything away on one location with Juggernaut on the final turn is enough to just win.
Yes.
This would never really be a problem if Thanos was still like king, because Thanos was the main invalidator of just shift everything away because there's nothing to shift when there's no space to shift, right? So yeah, it's a bit, honestly, as much as I wasn't really like a Juggernaut hater, and like you, like I didn't really want to nuke it into outer space, but like the fact that like mid-range cares so little about points now is a bit annoying and a bit toxic, and that I can agree with. Yeah, but anyway, that was not my main point. My main point was that like Juggernaut being a 5/8 would just be called Alive 2.0 at that point, because like the whole point with Juggernaut going to 4/5 is to like reduce the pairings it could have like at 3 costs you could pair it with so many things, right? At 4 costs you pair it with less things. At 5 costs it becomes like, I mean, no one really cares about the 1, so it becomes just like play it on the final turn and win. So that's basically Alliance 2.0. But yeah, so I don't see it ever going to become 5-8 territory. But yeah, no, I do think that it's a little bit toxic that like mid-range cares less about points and just about the Juggernaut in your deck. You know,
I also don't think it's a surprise. I'll say this, that a lot of the mid-range decks that I've been going for are mid-range decks that fill up the board. Because what that does is give me like a sort of positioning advantage in Juggernaut mirrors, where it's like, all right, because I'm a Mysterio deck or whatever, right? Like I'm filling up the board on the final turn of the game. Your Juggernaut doesn't work, but you, an Invisible Woman first deck, my Juggernaut does work, right? Like that is something that sticks out a lot in terms of like how these decks have evolved. Like there's a reason Gwenpool Mysterio has become an important points package in those Axis of Evil decks, and it's because of the positioning advantage against Juggernaut it can give you, I think.
Yeah, I was about to like really highlight that one as well, like literally right before you said it. Because like when I mentioned Thanos, I straight away thought of like, what's the generic thing people are doing to make you feel more like Thanos-like and not care about Juggernaut. So it's really Mysterio, right? It's a 2-mana card that fills 3 spots. You know, but obviously playing cards like that put you in a worse position versus things like Clock. But that's just how the meta goes anyway. Oh, but I have one more point about the Mercury, which is I because we started this thing with the whole topic with like Mercury is not actually supposed to be like so generic, but Mercury is kind of like generic now because like if you notice the amount of like small little just like 2-3 card move packages in everything, like there's so many decks with just little bits of move packages in there. The Mercury just kind of like just splashes off into that. Like if there wasn't that package, you would be way better off just running Jeff. It's just a bigger card, right? But like because there's like so much splash damage when it comes to like just all these little move packages that exist in the meta right now, I think Mercury kind of makes sense right now, even though it's so weird, right? Like calling Mercury a generic card that goes well in every deck is we moved from Cannonball to this.
Yeah, it is definitely weird. And I think that's a good segue to the next topic, which is, of course, the move deck itself. And I think a lot of why Mercury is good is because this deck is really good, right? Like the Human Torch swap with Vulture made Vulture way worse, but Human Torch, I think, arguably better because now people can't freely blow up your Human Torch with their Killmongers anymore. And that was a big like impetus. It was a big driving force behind why people would want to be playing Move Bounce, for example, so that your opponent wouldn't just be able to freely interact with the stuff. I think that is like notably an improvement in Move. I think Move is easily one of the best decks in the game. I think it is hard enough that it will not be a major issue everywhere, but it is a very powerful list. And I also think it's worth pointing out that Move as an archetype, if Killmonger is not being meaningfully important to them, right? Like if you're not afraid of Killmonger anymore, and you have Cosmo and Alliath, there is only one card you were actually afraid to see, and it is Mercury. There are 0 other cards you're afraid to see. Like, oh, okay, you're going to Shadow King and Shang-Chi me? No, you're not. I'm a Cosmo Alliath deck. You literally can't do that, right? Like, you're not allowed to. It doesn't work. And that means that Mercury takes on an even more outsized importance because, like, I'm not saying that, like, Mercury is, like, the Spider-Man meme where he's just holding back the train or anything like that, but I think it's pretty close to that because there are 0 other cards that can profitably beat a Move deck. And I think Move would probably beat more or less everything. It would be the Hela of this metagame, where it's just like, what's up? Nice mid-range deck, moron. You don't have any cards that can do anything about this if Mercury didn't exist. Which is largely to say, shout out to Mercury. You're doing a great job. I get that we could probably 2-1 you. Just your stats are probably really good. I would not want to do that. I've been like turning it over in my head for a while. Like, do you want to 2-1 Mercury? And I've come to the conclusion that no, I actually don't want to nerf the card that is holding back the storm.
Yeah, Mercury in this current meta is so relevant. Like we say, right? Like the amount of stuff it's holding back just from like the ability. Okay, so what I really want to say here is that the thing that gives Move their power right now is 2 things, right? Firstly, the invalidation of so-called like relevant tech cards, right? They don't really care about pretty much every other tech card used against them because it doesn't work. And then the second thing is player agency. Move has the ability to, like we always talk about this, reallocate, right? Reallocate their points to where it's relevant. Like you don't have to win 3 locations in Marvel Snap, you just need to win 2 and win them hard, win them well. So move lets you reallocate, right? So that's what good players do well. And Mercury invalidates the player agency, right? Like just the 2/2 existing on the board kind of makes it difficult for like I mean, like even if you know that you can move stuff here, their Mercury also can move, and then it's a bit difficult, right? Because Mercury just stops you from like reallocating your stuff, and then like reduces the player agency on the good players that rely on that to win games. So yeah, Mercury definitely something that's relevant right now. And I do agree also that like move in particular, I'm so happy to see that Helion is getting to see its time in the sun. Like it's we talked about this many months back. Like Helion is actually like maybe like one or two chain like patches away from being good, and then this is the patch that he's actually pretty good.
I was a believer largely because I was just like, look at all that agency on a 5/8 body. You know?
Right? Yeah.
I was like, what if we play this as a Legion in mid-range decks? And it turns out Move just sort of turned into one of those, and it's way more than a Legion. Like it's just doing some work.
It's like a class-specific Legion. Like it's doing Legion things, but it's better because it's in a move deck. It fits perfectly in a move deck.
Speaking of 5-drops that one of us loves, I have become a sort of Ben Grimm cultist recently. Thing First Steps is just so goated. Like just an unbelievably awesome card. It took a while because like in high-powered metagames, he's not something you really want to be doing, right? But he is a sort of apex mid-range matchup crusher where if you are both playing relatively fair cards, he is hard enough to interact with, big enough and annoying enough that he is the sort of mid-range end boss. This is notably not relevant in a world where people are able to play, Hela or Move or Mr. Negative properly. But we don't live in that world because of the Axis of Evil. Shout out to Stardust. There just aren't enough people playing Hela for me to want to put her in my deck again, but I will if I have to. You know what I mean? Like, these cards are preventing things from getting too out of control, which allows Ben Grimm to function in his mid-range end boss role, which is really, really good. He is mostly un-Shang-Chiable. It's hard to actually have a tech card that does anything about him. He sits on the board, he gets bigger, and he's a high-leverage winner. The more both of you are competing to win one lane, the better he is. Oh. And in mid-range matchups with similar point packages, Ben Grimm is like, you guys are always going to have one lane that you guys are fighting over. A lot of the time, the way those matchups play out is one of you has pretty much established they're going to win one lane. One of you has pretty much established they're going to win another lane, and you're fighting over the other one. And that is where Ben Grimm excels. He is a massive high leverage winner. He is a clutch card.
So I wasn't even going to say anything about that, but then you brought it up, and then I just realized that that's such a good selling point for the card. Okay, I'm going to come back to this later. But anyway, I just wanted to say that like this thing, first steps thing to you is like Legion to me. If you guys watch this podcast for like the last 1 year or something, I try to fit Legion into everything because I respect and I value the power of like having the 13th card in your deck, which is the location under your control. The 13th card is the location, is what I'm trying to say. So Legion puts that under your control to a certain extent, which is why I really love Legion. It's a 5 like cost mid-range card, right? But the thing first steps thing that you mentioned, which is like it's a super high leverage winner for locations that are being highly contested, is so important with this card. It's a super strong selling point as well, because like what the thing first steps does is that you are supposed to play it into locations that you are fighting for. It's not like you play this card in another location to win solo. You're supposed to play this in locations that you are actively trying to beat your opponent in, and it does a very good job of doing that. Because like the thing about thing first steps is that it blows up what's existing there, so they can't recommit. They can't recommit in time because it dies and then the game ends. You get what I'm trying to say? So like I think that's such an insane selling point for thing first steps. I mean, obviously it's not going to be relevant forever. Like Legion is not always relevant, but when it's relevant, like this is the main relevancy of the card.
In that context, I also want to give a huge shout out to Ghost Spider. Repositioning your thing first steps is so gross. Like, it's actually so disgusting to be able to do that. It's an absurdity because he's such a big threat in a lane that your opponent has to be like, all right, I'm either really committing to that lane or I'm abandoning it. And either way, if you move the thing first steps out of it, That's really good. Doesn't matter which one they do. You're happy with either of them, right? And so you end up with like, you move the thing 4 steps out and it's like, all right, let's say they really committed to that lane. Well, you just win the other 2. If they abandon it, just make sure you're covering what happens if they abandon it, right? Like it's just really strong. And Goat Spider, that is what I'm calling her now, is just such a beast of a 1-drop. I really enjoy her. Last up, word on pricing in Marvel Snap. Every so often, I see someone do a bunch of math and convert things from like tokens to gold to whatever, right? They're like, this is actually X amount of dollars. And I want to bring that up because I think a lot of that stuff is basically fake. And I offer as evidence, there is a member of my community who did the math on how much free stuff he got from Deadpool's Diner. And what he got was a ton of stuff. He got a lot of things from Deadpool's Diner. And that, you know, like a bunch of borders, a bunch of emotes. And if you do all the math on that and you value the emotes at 2250 gold, and you value the borders at their token rate of what it would take to acquire them, and you go do all that, what he did was earn $2,000 of cosmetics in Deadpool's Diner, which is an insane sentence. I think anyone who hears that is like, what are you talking about? That's not how much.
Yeah, when you say this just now, it's just like, what the heck is he talking about, man?
Yes, but if you actually go sit down and do the math, that's what it ends up being. You get like a bunch of different border sets. And granted, he really farmed Deadpool's Diner. I'm not going to sit here and act like he didn't really farm Deadpool's Diner. Played a bunch of Deadpool's Diner. But I think it just sort of goes to show how fake all these numbers are when so many of the currencies in this game are also free to play, right? Like, technically all of those currencies that you would use to spend on this stuff, it's not just a direct one-to-one with US dollars, it's also you're getting X amount free to play, which makes making a real assessment of the Marvel Snap economy just really hard to do, right? Because if you convert it to US dollars, you have to ignore the way in which you can acquire them free to play. And I think it's reasonable to just be like, I'm going to ignore that and convert it all to US dollars. But it also means that whatever numbers you talk about when you convert Marvel Snap into US dollars, it's going to be way too high on the US dollar scale to make any sense. And I like, it's something that I've been kicking around for a while, but like, obviously it's like, you know, because people are like, oh, a new card in Marvel Snap costs so much. And it's like, yes, but it's also free. And that balance is super weird to me. Like, it's a weird dynamic to exist in, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at this breakdown right here because I have the breakdown of what I'm just looking at the breakdown. I'm just like, that's $1,800 in theory of borders. To me, it's just like I'm never buying. I'm never buying a border again. I mean, I never really did. Like, like, it just like makes you feel like, at the end of the day, all this price stuff is super relative, right?
It's very like it's not even like layers of obfuscation per se, because there are those. I don't want to act like those aren't there, but it's also like it's kind of crazy that it ends up looking like that. You know what I mean? Like it's not just like, oh, this is layers of obfuscation, but it's also like I find it hard to actually do a real analysis of anything because of the way all of the currencies are simultaneously paid at a high at like what you might argue is a rapacious rate, but also are available for free at a very good rate. And so it's a very hard thing to do and to look at. And it's like I look at that and I'm like $2,000. Right? Like that's what happens.
Crazy,
yeah. You're just like it takes your breath away, but then you zoom out and you're like, borders. Like it's like it's like, all right, I don't know, like it's just such an odd thing to come across, and it really sort of got me thinking about the ways in which people analyze the Marvel Snap economy. It's odd.
I wonder who actually got upset from the fact that they just realized this, like, oh my god, I actually spend so much on borders. There's bound to be people that actually spend that much on borders and then get upset from this realization. But it's probably not a lot. Oh, I'm not gonna assume, but like I think of all the things you can spend money on in Marvel Snap, I think emotes least than borders, in my opinion. Okay, this is super subjective. What do you guys think? Like, what is the least likely cosmetic you will spend on? To me, I think it's emotes than borders, and then obviously variants are the ones that most people spend on. But what do you think?
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal. He's been Lambie Series. No confusion this time, and he's about to take us out.
So the best part is I didn't hear it wrong the previous time. But anyway, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.